Y'all gotta pick a side and pick it right now.
Janot ain't gonna stop till he takes everything.
Believe you can win this one.
I want justice for my wife's murder.
Let's take Tommy Egan down.
All right, let's go.
Closing in.
Am I calling a favor?
This is the moment everything has been building toward. No more hiding, no more half measures, no more room for mistakes. Every decision made this season leads right here, to a point where survival isn't guaranteed and loyalty doesn't mean safety. Episode 10 isn't just a finale, it's a reckoning. Because once the dust settles, Chicago will never look the same again, and neither will Tommy Egan. Going into the moment of truth, there's a heavy feeling hanging over this episode, and it's not just because it's the season finale. This episode feels different. It feels final. From the very beginning, the pressure is already crushing down on Tommy from every possible direction. The streets are unstable, alliances are cracked, and the margin for error is completely gone. This isn't about building an empire anymore. It's about whether Tommy even makes it out alive. The title alone tells us everything we need to know. The moment of truth isn't about one single reveal. It's about every lie, every betrayal, and every decision catching up all at once. Tommy has been moving fast all season, adapting, reacting, surviving by instinct. But instinct only gets you so far before reality forces your hand. And in episode 10, that moment arrives. There's no more delaying the inevitable. Chicago itself feels like it's holding its breath. The streets are tense, the power structure is fragile, and everyone knows something big is coming. The balance that once existed is completely gone, and that's dangerous. When power shifts this violently, it never happens quietly. Someone always pays the price. Sometimes it's the loudest player. Sometimes it's the one who thought they were safe. Tommy is walking into this episode carrying more weight than ever before. He's dealing with loss, betrayal, and the growing realization that his presence in Chicago may be doing more harm than good, not just to his enemies, but to the people closest to him. That internal conflict matters, because it changes how he moves. This isn't the reckless Tommy from the past. This is someone who understands consequences, but still refuses to back down. What makes this episode so dangerous is that every storyline is converging at the same time. There's no clean exit, no easy win, and no clear path forward. Law enforcement is circling. The streets are ready to explode. Former allies are questioning whether sticking with Tommy is worth the risk. And behind it all is the quiet truth that this version of Chicago cannot last much longer. This is where the beginning of the end truly comes into play. Not just for individual characters, but for the entire structure of power in the city. Episode 10 isn't interested in tying everything up neatly. Instead, it exposes how broken everything already is. It shows us what happens when pressure builds for too long and finally has nowhere left to go. There's also an emotional weight to this episode that can't be ignored. Loss isn't just something characters talk about. It's something they're forced to sit with. Decisions made earlier in the season now feel heavier, more permanent. Regret creeps in, but regret doesn't change outcomes. It only reminds you of what you can't undo. As this episode unfolds, one thing becomes clear very quickly. Survival will require sacrifice. Not everyone is making it out of this chapter. Some endings will be violent, some quiet, and some unresolved on purpose. That uncertainty is what makes this episode so powerful. You don't know who to trust, who will fall, or what the final image of Chicago will look like when the episode fades to black. This is the point where the story stops asking questions and starts delivering answers, even if those answers are uncomfortable. The moment of truth isn't just about what happens next. It's about what can no longer be avoided. And once that line is crossed, there's no turning back. This is only the beginning. As everything on the line unfolds, the episode makes it painfully clear that there are no safe positions left in Chicago. Every character, every alliance, and every move is now exposed. This is the stage where survival depends not on power alone, but on timing, loyalty, and the ability to see betrayal before it strikes. Episode 10 strips away the illusion of control and shows just how fragile this entire world has become. For Tommy, the pressure is relentless. He's no longer fighting just to expand or protect territory. He's fighting to keep his world from collapsing in on itself. The enemies are obvious, but the real danger comes from the unpredictable ones. the people who might smile to his face while quietly calculating their exit. When everything is on the line, fear changes people, and this episode leans heavily into that truth. You can feel it in the tension, in the silence between conversations, and in the way decisions are made with hesitation instead of confidence. What makes this chapter so intense is how personal it becomes. The lines between business and family are completely erased. Every loss hits harder because there's no distance left to hide behind. The streets don't just threaten Tommy's operation, they threaten the people he's trying to protect. And that forces him into a dangerous mindset where logic battles emotion. The wrong choice here doesn't just cost money or influence, it costs lives. At the same time, law enforcement begins tightening the net in a way that feels suffocating. The pressure from outside mirrors the chaos within the streets, creating a perfect storm. Every move is watched, every mistake amplified. The walls feel closer than ever, and the question isn't whether someone will fall, it's who and how many will be dragged down with them. This is the part of the story where even the strongest players start questioning whether the game is worth it anymore. Alliances that once seemed unbreakable now feel paper-thin. Trust becomes a liability rather than a strength. Everyone is holding something back, keeping secrets, protecting themselves first, and that selfish instinct creates cracks that enemies are more than ready to exploit. Episode 10 does a brilliant job of showing how quickly power can evaporate when unity disappears. The moment doubt enters the room, control is already lost. There's also a sense of inevitability running through this section of the episode. Characters aren't just reacting to danger, they're preparing for consequences they know are coming. Some are desperate to escape, others are determined to go down fighting, and a few are still clinging to the hope that they can outsmart fate. But fate doesn't negotiate. It arrives when it's ready, and this episode makes that painfully clear. Emotionally, everything on the line hits hard because it forces characters to confront who they really are. When there's nothing left to lose, true intentions rise to the surface. Loyalty is tested in ways that can't be taken back. Betrayals feel heavier, not because they're shocking, but because they're almost expected. In a world built on violence and survival, trust has always been temporary. This episode just exposes that reality fully. The pacing here is relentless. There's no time to breathe, no moment of relief. One problem flows directly into the next, stacking pressure until it feels unbearable. And that's intentional. The episode wants you to feel the same suffocating tension the characters are experiencing. It wants you to understand that there is no clean solution, no perfect ending waiting on the other side. By the time this section reaches its peak, it's clear that the choices made here will define what comes next, not just for Chicago, but for the entire Power universe moving forward. This isn't about winning anymore, it's about what survives after everything else is burned away. Because when everything is on the line, only the truth remains. As Legacy in Blood takes center stage, the episode shifts from pure survival to something far more permanent: consequences. This is the part of the story where actions stop being temporary and start defining the future. Blood has already been spilled this season, but Episode 10 forces the characters to face what that blood truly means. Not just who died, but why they died, and what that loss leaves behind. In the world of power, legacy is never about what you build. It's about what survives after you're gone. For Tommy, this idea cuts deeper than ever. Everything he's done in Chicago was supposed to lead somewhere. Control, stability, maybe even redemption in his own twisted way. But as this episode unfolds, it becomes clear that legacy isn't something you get to choose. It's something others assign to you based on the damage left in your wake. Tommy is forced to confront the reality that his presence has shaped lives in ways he can't undo, and that realization weighs heavily on every move he makes. The episode doesn't glorify the violence here. Instead, it lingers on the aftermath. Every death leaves a vacuum, and vacuums are dangerous. Power doesn't disappear, it shifts. And when it shifts, it creates chaos. Characters who once played small roles are suddenly forced into bigger positions, whether they're ready or not. Others realize too late that the crown they were chasing comes with a cost they can't pay. What makes Legacy in Blood so powerful is how it connects the past to the future. Decisions made seasons ago echo loudly in this finale. Old wounds resurface, unfinished business demands attention, and secrets buried deep begin to surface. There's a sense that history is repeating itself, but with different faces and higher stakes. The cycle of violence doesn't end, it evolves. Family, both chosen and biological, becomes a major theme here. Blood ties don't guarantee loyalty, and loyalty doesn't guarantee protection. Characters are forced to choose between preserving their bloodline and protecting their power, and those choices are never clean. Some sacrifices feel necessary, others feel unforgivable, and once those lines are crossed, there's no way back to who they used to be. There's also a quiet fear running through this section of the episode, the fear of being forgotten. In a world where respect is earned through fear and dominance, being erased is worse than dying. Some characters fight harder not to survive, but to be remembered, to leave a mark, and that desperation pushes them into decisions that seal their fate instead of saving them. As the episode builds toward its final moments, the idea of legacy becomes unavoidable. Who controls Chicago after the smoke clears? What kind of city will it become? And more importantly, whose blood paid for that future? The answers aren't comforting. They're messy, violent, and incomplete. But they're honest. Legacy in Blood doesn't offer closure. It offers transformation. It shows that endings in the Power universe are never truly endings. They're handoffs. One era bleeds into the next, carrying scars, grudges, and unfinished wars forward. By the time the episode reaches its final beats, it's clear that Chicago will move on, but it won't forget. This is how the season ends, not with peace, but with consequences. Not with certainty, but with questions. And that's exactly what makes this finale so powerful. Because the blood spilled here doesn't just mark the end of Season 3, it writes the beginning of what comes next.